Hi, folks. Thanks for watching my monologue. As you may have heard, there's been a recent run on guns and ammunition. I just wanted to let you know that Guns Etc. is in a 10,200 square foot building which holds a lot of guns. So Guns Etc. is open and has a lot of product. Or you can go to gunsetc.com. That's gunsetc.com. And if you like my monologue, please subscribe to our channel using 960 The Patriot. Welcome back, Tuesday, April 7th, 2020. We shall redound to our coronavirus agonistes in a moment. I've been speaking to a lot of people today about something we've been speaking about here too, though. The closing of our nation, yes. Our businesses, yes. But really, in a way, I think we have not grasped yet our churches and synagogues, massively important mediating forces of composition and adhesion in this society. As I mentioned yesterday, and as Paul Harvey put it, if the devil were to come to America, that would be the first thing he'd do here, is close the churches. This is Holy Week for Jews and Christians, Passover and Easter. In both holidays, we celebrate freedom, different kinds of freedom. But we are also celebrating rebirth and faith, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, too. Here in America, we provide religious freedom like no other place on earth. We were founded in part to do just that, and we're still the best in the world on it. There are, of course, other parts of the world where freedom, particularly religious freedom, is not only at a discount, but is wholly unknown, wholly non-existent. A country that cannot provide religious freedom cannot be a truly free society. A country that absents God, despite the absurd ads of Ronald Reagan Jr., is paid to promote on behalf of atheism. A country that absents God is a country in trouble. You can actually correlate human freedom in countries based on their tolerance for and acceptance of religious freedom. I just wanted to remind of that as folks prepare for their Passover and Easter celebrations. We celebrate freedom here. We also celebrate equality here. Those are the twin philosophical objects of our founding. And the equality we celebrate is not, as Winston Churchill put it, the equal distribution of misery. And yet, just now, we are going through a lot of misery, aren't we? If I may turn to our coronavirus response, it has shaken a lot of our faith, our national faith, and our faith in each other and in our institutions, hasn't it? At least a faith in our institutions that it's called us to fear one another. There used to be very good reasons to denounce face masking in public. We now find more and more of our fellow Americans doing it to protect not their identities, but their health. And of course, I support that where needed, necessary, or wanted. But I caution us about the slow acceptance of a new reality, distancing ourselves from each other, isolating and indeed fearing one another, whatever the reason. I'm amazed how quickly it took shape and have been asked a lot of questions about it, given that if you drill down into the numbers, they are scattershot and scattering. We've lost 12,474 Americans to COVID-19. We are told this will be a bad week and we will lose many more. It's terrible and it's tragic. But in knowing the daily body count, I want you to also know the recovery rate if you get this virus. It's over 98% if you get it. Your chances of getting it are also very rare. If you live in New York City, where it is most rampant, at most your chances of getting it are 0.8% based on the population tested. By the way, those who have died with no underlying conditions are less than 2%. So, to the massive shutdown. First question I'm asked is, how can it take place so fast? Over constantly shifting numbers. Numbers, by the way, that are now shifting ever downward. You've heard my thesis on this. We've been geared towards panic. Soft America invading hard America. 2 generations of college students needing safe spaces, not over real violence, but over ideas they do not like. Ideas that were respectable and mainstream 2 generations ago and are still ideas the majority of Americans hold, or close to the majority of Americans hold. 2 generations of a politics and society trained to believe the worst, and that America is not great and strong, but evil and deservingly so of deserved punishment and harm. Trump isn't wrong. He's Hitler. Conservative speakers and writers aren't conservative speakers or writers, much less intellects. They are fascists and racists. Republican policies aren't bad. They are existential threats to America. We've ramped and revved up the analogies and metaphors beyond reason, so we're conditioned to think and believe in extremists and the worst. The Joker is a movie people can see as more realistic and generalized than, I don't know, perhaps Jaws, which shows a monster who's an anomaly. Yes, then the second question. Why do so many conservatively inclined people and institutions buy into it? Well, you've heard me talk of the conservative Stockholm Syndrome, too. The view that because of overwhelming pressure from society, elites, corporate boardrooms, entertainment, education, media, you name it, we aren't quite right and they aren't quite wrong. Way too many buy into this because it's hard to push against the age that pushes against you, as Flannery O'Connor put it. Why do you think it's so rare and hard to find Republican candidates for office you really, really like? Why do you think there are caucuses like the Freedom Caucus? If it were a majority of our team, it wouldn't need a caucus. Heck, why do you think it's so rare to get a candidate for president who embraces the full spectrum of conservatism strongly? It's been a problem for a long time. Ronald Reagan could not beat Jerry Ford in 1976. And in 1980, Reagan had to fight tooth and nail to win the nomination, even with friends of his and stalwarts of the movement supporting others. William Buckley initially supported George H.W. Bush in 1979-1980. George Will initially supported Howard Baker of Tennessee. Heck, Barry Goldwater endorsed Ford over Reagan in 1976. So I remind you, it's hard to push against the age. When we do, it's not the norm, it's the exception. That's why so many conservatives can buy into so much of the narrative of our culture or our age. But when we say don't watch television, read your news, we mean it, for a reason. My general manager put it well. Television is based on ratings, and people are paid as hosts of those television or news shows based on ratings. And bleeding is leading. When CNN tells itself and its patrons that's the channel people turn to in an emergency or crisis, think about the benefit of an emergency or a crisis to places like CNN. And that's why we've been put in crisis mode for so long, in a steady, odd Gresham's parallel law of extremist rhetoric, chasing out calm and reasoned rhetoric. So of course it's better for the media to promote every coronavirus death as breaking news. Just imagine how scared and shuddered society would be if they led with things like the average age of those afflicted by it, a greater than 98% recovery rate, a low chance of getting it. Note indeed, that is how all the media and government officials first described it, by the way. And then numbers like 2 million became the norm. Now we're told anywhere from 80,000 to 140,000, give or take. You know where that model comes from? It comes from the Washington Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. You know what their low estimation is on that 80,000 plus model? A potential 49,000 deaths. Do you ever hear that number, 49,000? Ever? That would be a number far less than drug overdoses in America in any given year. A number those in substance abuse prevention would actually celebrate. How do I know that and why do I say that? Because when we moved overdose deaths downwards from 70,000 to 67,000 last year, it was cause for praise and note. I can't stand those numbers, but we will live with them as we work on curtailing them, right? But somehow we panic and frighten ourselves into something less. And by the way, that which we frightened ourselves into affects the older population worse than the younger, unlike drug overdoses. That's interesting too, isn't it? Run your own numbers on your own epidemics and pathologies. See if you can't find the same. We can overreact and do the wrong thing in our panic and overreaction all the time. We were provoked into various overreactions throughout our history. I think the South overreacted to the election of Lincoln. I think we overreacted at Kent State, and I think we overreacted in precipitously withdrawing and surrendering in Vietnam. It used to be two countries. Now it's one. Just as we think, or used to think, of China as two countries, and now just one. Oh, I opened talking about freedom of religion as a guidepost for freedom and normalcy generally. Just before this show, I looked up Freedom House's analysis of religious freedom in the One China. This sentence haunts, quote, repressive campaigns typically featured raids on unregistered Bible study meetings or religious ceremonies and the detention of hundreds of religious leaders and lay believers, close quote. That should shock. But we've become inured to it, as it should shock what China did to Tibet and the Uyghur Muslims, but we've become inured to that. What China did to the world with this virus and how they handled and lied about it should not have shocked. My worry is that if we become inured to our response, that will become permanent too. Just as it's not good to overreact, it's not good to get accustomed to panic, or mortal funk, or junk thought.